All right, it's 1 o'clock. We may still have some other attendees join us as we get started here, but we'll go ahead and jump right into today's webinar. First, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. A couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is brought to you by a partnership between the University of Kentucky's Community and Economic Development Initiative of Kentucky and the Commonwealth of Kentucky's Brownfield office in the Cabinet for the Environment or Energy and the Environment. This has been about a 2-year partnership that we've been working together, and each month we produce a new webinar to support downtown revitalization and brownfield redevelopment. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about improving the pedestrian experience and essentially covering some basics related to conducting a walking audit in your community. And really what we're getting at is, how do we answer this question? How do we know if our community is walkable, comfortable, and safe for everyone? But a couple of housekeeping items here first. We are in a webinar format today, so you are not going to be able to chat with other folks in the room with us, but you should see a Q&A function on your screen on Zoom. And I would invite you at any point throughout the webinar today, if you have a question or comment, please share it in the Q&A. And as we wrap up, I will circle back to the Q&A dialog box and respond or address any questions that we may have. The other thing that I should let you know is we are recording today's webinar. So we record each of our webinars and make those available on our video library that you can find on our website. But since you are a registered attendee, you will be receiving a link to the recording and all of the resources that I share or may mention along the way. So you should be receiving that usually within a week, week and a half, 2 weeks at the max, depending on how long it takes us to get this video uploaded into our library. So let's go ahead and jump right into today. So for folks who may not know me, my name is Shane Barton. I am the Downtown Revitalization Coordinator for the Community and Economic Development Initiative of Kentucky. I'll often use the acronym CEDIK, C-E-D-I-K. The easiest way to reach me, if you'd like to follow up after the webinar, is shane.barton@uky.edu. And I would invite you to reach out if you have any questions or would like to follow up on perhaps how to conduct a walking audit in your community. Always like to start with this slide. It's a distilled process, sort of planning redevelopment process that we developed, but I always like to point out where the components of our conversation fit within this cycle. And when we're thinking about walking audits, the assessments and inventories and the evaluation of the environment really fall within the first half of this process when we're talking about doing our building inventory or environmental site assessments, or when we start to move into evaluating findings and considering those reuse options or strategic direction setting. The walking audit is certainly a great piece of data to help support conversations related to your long-term redevelopment strategies, but can also be used for other things that we'll touch on throughout today's webinar. But before we get too deep, I want to just touch base on a couple terms that I may use, and I want to make sure we all have a kind of a common understanding. I may use the term public realm, and what I mean there is really the areas in a city that exist within the right-of-way that are available to the public. You know, these are often transportation corridors. We're talking streets, sidewalks, the alleys, different trails, those sorts of things. When we talk about pedestrian friendly, what we're really talking about is the design and the layout of the public realm and how that may intentionally encourage or discourage walking and biking within an area. And when we're talking about an area, it may be a single block, it may be a corridor, it may be a whole district, but really this sort of incorporates all of the elements that make a place safe and comfortable. And then walkability, which obviously is a huge part of what we're talking about, is really the overall quality of conditions in the area. You know, how friendly is the built environment to pedestrians? Are the facilities or infrastructure appropriate? Are the destinations that we may be walking to safe? Is it a place where we may go or a place where we may want to walk? So again, just wanting to get us on the same page, since I will probably reference some of these terms throughout today's presentation. But I really want to kind of start off with this slide thinking about why downtown. And obviously, if we're talking about downtown revitalization, we're focused on sort of a small urbanized area. But one of the reasons that we really focus our work in downtown is you can't really easily replicate a historic downtown. There is a sort of a historic density of assets, of people, of businesses, of memories, of cultural and historic identity that are all intertwined in this space. And that there is a level of resiliency that comes from this entanglement of built assets and ingrained memories. But one thing I always like to remind folks, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as we discuss walkability, is that investments in downtown revitalization are as diverse as the downtowns themselves. So while we may be talking about creating jobs or increasing property values, what we're really talking about today is about improving the quality of life while also touching on some of those other pieces of revitalization success. And then the image to the right really is there to demonstrate all of the elements of the public realm. So we can see how the sidewalks, the streets, the buildings all lay on the topography of the community to create these spaces that we navigate. And what we're talking about today are navigating on foot or potentially even on bicycles. So just a quick note here about mobility and walking, okay? When I use the terms walking or pedestrians, I really am using those as an inclusive term today. And to quote the Inclusive Walk Audit Facilitators Guide from 2020, when I refer to walking, I'm really including both ambulatory and non-ambulatory modes. So walking encompasses all forms of mobility devices. We're talking about using a wheelchair, a cane, a walker, or another device that allows the user to travel at a human speed. So when I use the term walking or pedestrian, I certainly do not want to be exclusive with those terms and really want us to focus on inclusivity because it is important to the walk audit because really the street should be a usable space for people of all ages, experiences, and abilities. And I just want us to take note of that before we get in to the meat of the webinar today, okay? But let's start with some safety. Obviously, we're talking about pedestrians, we're talking about walking, and one of the key elements of why this is such a critical conversation is simply safety. So in 2020, 6,500 pedestrian deaths in the United States, and unfortunately, that represents nearly a 5% increase from 2019. The staggering piece here is that we also have to account for a decrease in overall traffic during the pandemic. So this really underscores the severity of pedestrian safety in poorly designed streets. If we look at the 9 years from 2010 to 2019, in the Smart Growth America's 2021 Dangerous by Design report, they note that in the US, over 50,000 pedestrians were killed, and that represents 14 people every day, okay? So, streets with high speeds, they obviously pose a significant risk, but that risk of severe injury or death obviously increases with speed. For example, a pedestrian hit by a car traveling at 40 miles per hour has an 85% chance of being killed compared to a 5% chance at 20 miles per hour. So you can see just a 20 mile per hour or doubling of that speed, incredibly high impact on a pedestrian in terms of mortality. Okay. But we know that many of our neighborhoods lack basic pedestrian infrastructure. So about 73% of pedestrian fatalities in 2019 occurred in more urbanized areas, often due to inadequate sidewalks and crosswalks. So street lighting is also a contributor here. So the Federal Highway Administration states that around 3/4 of pedestrian fatalities occur in the dark, which highlights our need for better lighting in urban planning and in these corridors where we are promoting pedestrian access and use, okay? But again, back to the idea of safe crosswalks and intersections, we also know that around 70% of pedestrian fatalities happen at non-intersection locations, which tells us that there really is a critical need for more crosswalks and pedestrian-friendly intersections. We've all encountered this. We've seen an intersection that isn't very pedestrian-friendly, that may not have any crosswalks, that may not have signals, and we may have participated in this ourselves or witnessed it in the street where people are literally dodging traffic, or if you remember the vintage video game, I guess at this point, Frogger, trying to jump across lanes of traffic and dodge incoming traffic. It always makes me really tense to see this, but I also have to reflect and look for the infrastructure. And if it isn't there, I can understand why a person takes those risks, right? They just have no other option if there are no signals or crosswalks to support their safe passage across the street. But when we take a step back and think more broadly about, downtown revitalization efforts, we're often focusing on, creating vibrant, livable, or thriving areas. But specifically, I want to note that walking, accessibility, and connectivity are critical elements in this process because we know that they provide economic benefits, community health and well-being improvements. They promote social interaction. They give us a way to promote environmental sustainability. They create a safer environment for all of our pedestrians and users within the public realm. And they improve the quality of life for a number of reasons. And we're going to touch on each of these briefly before we get into the kind of nuts and bolts of organizing your own walking audit. So when we think about the economic boost, we know that walkable downtown areas attract more foot traffic. And if you have seen any of my previous webinars, you may know that I often talk about humans and that foot traffic as the indicator species for a healthy downtown. So the more people we see sort of navigating, walking around a community, we know that community is probably more healthy than one that those people are absent, because foot traffic leads to more patronage of local businesses. We also know that pedestrian-friendly environments where I may be kind of moseying, if you will, or perusing through a downtown, taking my time, it's going to encourage me to linger and potentially spend more money and time in those places. So just this quick quote from Jeff Speck. Walkable downtowns are more economically vibrant and socially inclusive. It often leads to higher retail sales and property values benefiting the local economy. When we think about improved health and well-being, we're talking about encouraging walking through accessible and connected design, and that promotes physical activity, which can improve public health. It also allows us to reduce our reliance on vehicles, which means we are producing less air pollution, less noise pollution, and contributing to an overall healthier environment. So the American Public Health Association, quoted here, increased walkability in urban areas is directly linked to higher levels of physical activity among residents, which can significantly reduce the risk for chronic diseases such as obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. Okay. When we think about social interaction, a walkable and connected downtown really fosters these sorts of social interactions and community engagement. Public spaces and pedestrian zones are hubs for social activity, and they really do enhance a sense of community and improve the quality of life. Whether we're talking about community members meeting and interacting with each other while they walk or walking their dogs, or perhaps walking to work or to the store, this space in the public realm gives folks an opportunity to interact with each other. So the Project for Public Spaces, quoted here, walkable communities encourage more interaction among residents, fostering a greater sense of community and belonging. And we know that community and belonging is important because if you're aware, the World Health Organization in the last year or two actually noted loneliness as a sort of global health pandemic or epidemic right now. That we really need to begin paying attention to, in particular for our elders who may be living alone in their community. Anything that we can do, in particular creating a healthy environment where they can interact with others and stem the loneliness, is good for quality of life. But when we think about environmental sustainability, we're really talking about sort of reducing our dependence on cars, lowering that carbon emission related with driving a car, and promoting a broader sense of sustainable living. Now, if we are lucky enough to have public transportation or bike lanes that complement these efforts, again, that additional sort of support also improves our eco-friendliness. So the World Resources Institute quoted here, cities that prioritize walking and cycling over car travel are not only reducing their carbon footprints, but making their environments more livable and attractive. We've talked a little bit already about safety and safety issues, but when we're thinking about enhancing safety, we're really talking about pedestrian infrastructure, those sidewalks, crosswalks, lighting, the things that encourage more people to walk, the things that make people feel comfortable and make people feel safe. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the National Association of City Transportation Officials quoted here, investing in pedestrian infrastructure reduces accidents and fatalities, making cities safer for everyone. Safe, walkable streets are essential for creating a vibrant and inclusive environment. Again, thinking about enhanced safety, poorly designed streets, they impact mortality and fatality, as we've already mentioned. And those key issues, again, just to sort of hammer this, because this will come back as we think about what are we actually looking at or looking for. These issues really include inadequate or absent sidewalks, insufficient or absent crosswalks, lighting, and even cars driving at a high rate of speed. So kind of the basics here, why do we love doing walk audits? Well, for one, it's a great way to gather information about street conditions. It's a great way to engage community members about something that they are kind of intimately familiar with. They see it every day. They may walk on it every day, and they may have noted these conditions or actually adjusted their own walking patterns to make their own routes safer or more comfortable. So, basically, community members go for a walk. They're noting the condition of the infrastructure. They're documenting any barriers to the walking environment or what makes their streets feel comfortable or not comfortable. They're also observing, how other pedestrians or folks on the sidewalk or in the public realm are using that space and who or what may be missing. I will say that a big piece is community engagement because we love creating shared experiences, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. But there's some other reasons why we may want to consider improving the pedestrian experience. So, for example, you may want to reduce traffic congestion in a specific area. You may want to allow or let people without cars safely navigate their environment. Again, talking about loneliness and interaction between neighbors. But what we know is when we give folks a walkable community, they tend to be more healthy and more active. They take advantage of it. If you remember during the early days of the pandemic, lots and lots and lots of people found those outdoor spaces as refuge, whether that be a local park or whether that simply be the sidewalk in their community. But giving people the option to walk instead of drive can really improve the safety and again, reduce air pollution and asthma rates for the particulate matter. Okay. But a walking audit can really occur for a lot of different reasons. We may want to simply document how walkable a route is and start to identify the barriers and benefits. What we may want to do. We may want to focus on bringing community members together to discuss problems or brainstorm solutions. Again, thinking about the realm of community engagement. We also may want to quantify disparities and assess how different neighborhoods may be impacted differently. But ultimately, we want to change the conditions. We want to identify those needed improvements to influence funding requests or planning processes or future projects by doing really focused engagement with elected officials or public works staff around those problems to request those specific types of changes. But we also may want to use them as evaluation to capture the conditions kind of before and after a renovation or an investment or revitalization effort impacts the public realm or other pedestrian infrastructure. It's great to kind of have a before and after snapshot to know if you have been successful in promoting walkability with your requested improvements or changes. So again, this is often a group activity. You can do it yourself, but I would recommend this as a group activity. Shared experiences are amazing when we think about community engagement, getting people to do this work together. But really, what we're talking about here within this group activity is participants using a checklist or a specific assessment to lead their participation. We usually use determine a planned route. And again, we're evaluating and using that checklist to document the street on a scale that helps us assess the walkability and start to think about how we can improve that to make it better for all people of all ages and abilities. Again, it can occur as a part of a bigger plan to assess overall walkability, or it could be a one-time, one-off event that you may want to do to express specific concerns about a specific area. So as you get started, really the first question to ask yourself is, what's the goal? Why am I doing this? What's the purpose? We may want to, again, engage our community or educate them about walkability. We may be wanting to perform kind of a technical evaluation of specific street needs as a part of a plan or a funding cycle for improvements. Or we may want to get decision makers involved and activated for change. Again, one of the reasons I love having groups do this is inviting those change makers or decision makers as a part of the group. Honestly, they can't deny what they have experienced in the presence of others. And there's something about a shared experience that carries through that group's ability to have conversations with decision makers to influence the change that they are desiring. So if your goal will inform who you invite, think about how big your group will be, what information you plan to capture, where you're going to walk. Are you going to need multiple groups? Are you going to need to do this multiple times? Are you going to want smaller groups to cover larger areas and so on? Okay. But again, we're capturing data. We are doing an assessment. So having a list of questions or a checklist for each person to document their observations is critical. And I'm going to share some of my favorite walking assessments and the links to those at the end of the presentation. But you may want just kind of a simple general sense of people's concerns as opposed to a technical assessment or engineering need. What you do want to know is who's going to be participating so that you can determine what type of tool is appropriate. But perhaps maybe even more importantly, you can start to think about what are you going to need to provide those attendees to make them comfortable and safe while they are conducting this walking audit. Okay. So things to consider, while you're choosing your assessment tool again, who's going to be conducting the audit or the audit. I recently worked on an audit with a group of high school students, and that required me to put a little bit more time and energy up front, really thinking about and getting everyone on the same page around what we were doing, the terms that they may see in the assessment, what that actually looks like on the street, and so on. But you want to also be cognizant of how much detail you want to capture. Some assessments are very basic and simple and work great for just capturing basic needs, but others are pretty detailed and provide for both qualitative and quantitative, which I prefer, and I'll share the one that I prefer near the end. Again, that one may be a little complex, especially for folks who may not be familiar with the public realm or pedestrian infrastructure in general. But in particular, there are a few that make it really, really easy. You also want to think about how the information is going to be used. So what are you collecting? How are you going to summarize it? How are you going to communicate it to those change makers or elected officials? And then additionally, I would invite you, if you find a tool that you like, but there's just some questions or assessment pieces that are absent, feel free to add those in. Collect it if you feel that it's relevant. I would encourage you to collect that. And if you can't find an existing tool that meets your needs, you can always modify one or create your own. And if you find yourself in this space, please, I would invite you to reach out. And if you'd like any support or additional conversation around how you may want to create your own or modify one, reach out and I'd be more than willing to support you in that endeavor. Okay. Again, we're walking, so you're going to need to think about, where are we walking? You can't cover an entire downtown. Maybe you can. If it's a little bit larger, it may be more than you can cover in a day or comfortably in one session. So, identify that route, keep your goals in mind, but, think about this as you're thinking about where you're going to be walking. Is this a route that's convenient for people you want to attend? Is this a route that people are already walking or could walk? Is this a route that connects a starting place to a destination? Again, is this somewhere where folks are more likely to be walking? And generally, how long do you want your route to be? In most cases, a half a mile to a mile is about the max that I would recommend in one session. Because remember, when it's going to take you a lot longer to walk and assess the route than it is simply to walk the route. I can walk a mile very comfortably at a fairly slow pace in about 15 minutes. But as you're doing walking audits, we're looking at about 30 minutes per half a mile, just to give you a sense of the time that you may want to plan for this activity. Okay. So, inviting participants is critical here. Again, going back to the idea of community engagement and creating that shared experience. If you have a big group, think about sort of multiple opportunities, multiple days, or even larger areas to cover. You could also have multiple groups do the same corridor or same route and compare all of those as sort of one set of data. But as you think about how big your group should be, a rule that I would recommend you following is make sure that the group is small enough that you can stay together and hear each other. Because there's going to be sort of talking and conversation happening along the way, usually facilitated or led by the leader of the group. But if your goal is to assess a broad territory, you may want to break up into smaller teams to cover different streets or different routes, or hold those events on multiple days. Okay. But you're going to need a leader. You're going to need someone who can take charge and kind of facilitate the process, that folks can ask questions and feel comfortable with. And this should be someone who is familiar with the assessment tool you're using, someone who is comfortable leading a group discussion about the street environment or the public realm, and someone who's somewhat familiar with the neighborhood. Like all meetings, make sure you provide some reminders around the start time, the dates, the location, what to wear, and I'll share a little bit about materials to prepare. But I always like to remind folks that we're going to be walking, to wear comfortable shoes. And I like to keep an eye on the weather and remind people to wear appropriate clothes. One caveat here, if it's raining, you may want to not do your walking assessment. One, you're using paper, that just creates a mess. And secondly, thinking about umbrellas, even in sort of the sun or the heat of the day, holding an umbrella and trying to capture notes on a clipboard is really difficult. So don't be afraid to reschedule or have rain dates just in case. We recently had to cancel one because of impending thunderstorms. Okay. But, again, what do you need? As you get started and you've got your group together, what do you need to have the day of? I always like to create a map of the route. I use Google oftentimes just because it's free. I can screenshot. I can use different layers, whether it's just the streets or the satellite imagery. I tend to prefer the streets unless I need the satellite imagery. But this is just a great addition to the walking assessment, so everyone's on the same page about the path or the route that you're going to be taking. Make sure you provide that walking audit checklist or assessment tool to everyone, and make sure you provide it in the languages spoken by your participants. Many of the tools that I'll share have English and Spanish versions that you can access. But again, clipboards and pens or pencils, name tags. Make sure you have cameras, or nowadays we mostly use our phones. I always like to remind people to bring sunscreen, snacks, and water, even though I'm going to bring my own and to share. And then lastly, since you are going to be out there in a group on the side of the walk and we're talking about safety, it's good to take some of those safety precautions as best practices and wear safety vests if you have some available. But the day of, you're going to meet up, usually meet up before 15, 20 minutes before you start walking. You're going to pass out your supplies, do a little introduction, review the instructions, especially if the audit tool is more comprehensive or complex. Make sure you build in some time for a little bit of training, just to kind of discuss what the expectations are, how to go through and mark, especially if there are things that rely on the person to make like a judgment call, how they feel, which there is no right or wrong answer. Make sure people are on the same page about how we should approach these assessments. And then good practice here is do some group introductions with your group, just so everyone is sort of comfortable with everyone else if they don't know each other. A couple other responsibilities that you may want to assign outside of just the leader who's going to be sort of facilitating and leading discussion. You may want someone whose sole responsibility is to record, note, and take notes of conversations and discussions as they take place. It's nice to have someone who's just there to take pictures of the group or take pictures of the conditions. And then I always like to add a sweep, which is someone who stays in the back of the group that makes sure we don't lose any stragglers, that can kind of keep the group moving, keep it condensed so we can stay together and we can hear each other. Again, just a couple other responsibilities you may want to think assigning to attendees there with your walking group. Okay. But while you're walking, while you are conducting the assessment, while you're walking as a group, having conversations, taking pictures of things that you encounter or observe, the leader should be prepared to sort of stop folks along the way to have discussion. And I like to sort of focus on these three things. What are we seeing? What are we hearing? What are we smelling? And those seem simple, but oftentimes they can really generate some interesting conversations around comfortability, around what it's like to be on that street. One thing that I would also recommend, and particularly as we talk about brownfield redevelopment and downtown revitalization, is I would consider incorporating vacant building or a vacant building inventory along your route, and perhaps assign one person to note those buildings and spaces and addresses along with pictures. It's typically one of the first steps we take in brownfield redevelopment planning is that building inventory. But since you are going to be walking that corridor, it is a great way to cover sort of both pieces of the data and collect that along the way. It can also help you have conversations around why do you think this building could be vacant? And sometimes it is the conditions around that building, the built environment or the public realm that may discourage pedestrians or walking, and you can start to maybe connect some dots around how that building may have became vacant over time. Okay. Again, while you're walking, you're really noting the strengths and the weaknesses. What's the condition of the sidewalks? Are they broken? Are they easy to navigate? Are they level? You usually stop at every intersection or every intersection crossing and kind of assess the condition. Is there a marked crosswalk? Are there flashing lights? Is there a signal or signage? Are there benches that you could take a break? Is there a pedestrian island in a large intersection that gives you a chance to sort of stop if you can't make it all the way across the street during the timing of the light? You're also going to be observing the behavior of people walking or biking or driving. What are they doing? Are they carrying things? Are they pushing strollers? Do they have other items with them that may indicate where they're coming from or where they're going? How are they interacting with others on the street? Are they following traffic laws? Are the cars that you're seeing go by, are they following traffic laws? So you're going to take note of the traffic flow, the vehicle speed, and start to document all of those factors that really contribute to the comfort of your group. Thinking about that, what you see, what you smell, what you hear, really sort of leads us into the comfort conversation. What's comfortable, what's uncomfortable. But one thing here to remember is this is all relative to the walker, right? And what may be comfortable or uncomfortable for me may not be the same for you. So I think we have to remind ourselves to provide space for everyone's sort of assessment and personal reflection on the conditions here. Many times we may also feel that, are we exposed to traffic? Is there a barrier between myself and the road? You often feel this if there is no sidewalk available and you're trying to decide, do I walk in the grass? Is this the right of way? Do I walk on the street, on the shoulder? All of that really contributes to your level of comfort and safety. The other thing, simple things like shade. Is there a tree canopy or tree coverings? Is there a bench with a covered awning that I could take a little respite in? So all of these things sort of contribute to our feelings of comfortability as we're navigating that environment. Okay. So again, thinking about all of those factors that contribute to your comfort while walking, knowing what understand or sort of knowing what and understanding what feels comfortable to you or uncomfortable to you, and thinking about is this a desolate or unwelcome environment? Do I feel comfortable here? But after your audit, after you've done your walk, after you've gone through your route, after you've marked your assessments, you've gone through your checklist, you've captured notes, you've captured observations, you have pictures. It is great to debrief with the group, to have a conversation right afterwards to gather everyone's impressions. What did you see? What were some of the possible solutions? And one little tip here, do not forget to gather everyone's surveys. You really need to have all of that to keep it as sort of as an artifact or an archive of your effort here. Have that recorder or the leader take notes as you all are discussing overall and broad observations. And you're also going to want to think about, who do we want to discuss this with, who may have the power to fix the problem or address the issues that we have noted that we would like to change or update. Okay. So that really gets us into sharing to create the change. So, follow up with participants, create a report, aggregate all of those notes, of the assessments, the pictures. Make sure you include pictures of people actually doing the assessment, like the picture I showed earlier of everyone pushing the carts. That took place in Harlan, Kentucky. And they were really interested in what was the accessibility for folks who may have mobility challenges, either with wheelchairs or walkers or pushing a carriage around downtown. But again, sort of a best practice here with your group, make sure everyone knows their time and effort was really appreciated. Keep in touch with them, let them know sort of next steps. And think about, writing some kind of article or op-ed for your local news to sort of stimulate the conversation, to get it out there in the public discourse. But you're going to want to put it all together to make a plan of sorts or a report. And this is the thing that you're going to share or present to those folks who can make the improvements. So you're going to, again, compile your assessments, notes, recommendations, photos, and it can be simple or detailed. I'm going to share a couple examples of some fairly detailed reporting and imagery that we created as a part of a downtown revitalization plan that really was our attempt to note some of these assessment pieces and promote and suggest recommendations. Okay. So you're going to want to share that report or that plan or present to your local officials or agencies, departments. Include those participants in your presentations if possible. Make sure your city staff or your town staff have it, especially if there's a planning process underway. If you're blessed enough to have a city planner or a town planner or engineer, share this with them. Make sure the mayor and council have access to it, and even consider getting on the agenda of your local city or town council to make that presentation and share the experience that you had with all of the other assessment team, right? So when we think about the assessment tool and what you're going to be doing, they often include a variety of things, but many of them include most of this. All right. Usually there is a map or a sketch involved of the intersection that you're assessing, where you can note issues. You're going to be noting, who's using the street, who's not using the street. You're going to be making comments about sidewalk or street conditions, of crossing conditions, of the street safety and appeal. Again, do you feel comfortable? Is there public transit access? You may also want to conduct this conduct this during winter weather to note, are we doing a good job during snow or ice events to make sure that pedestrians can navigate the environment in the absence of a motor vehicle or a car. And then there's usually a summary component. I love the AARP walking audit, because it is really a qualitative and quantitative that allows us to track scores and improvements and observations and align those with recommendations. It really is sort of I think the best of both worlds in terms of qualitative and quantitative assessments. Yeah. And I want to share just a couple examples, and I would certainly say that these are in the realm of complicated or detailed reporting. And to give you a sense, these are sort of snippets from a downtown plan we created for the city of Manchester in Clay County. Now, it wasn't just a walking audit that we did. This was part of a long sort of assessment process of their downtown that include inventorying the public realm, vacant buildings, parking, pedestrian flow, traffic flow, sort of destinations, and the concept of urban rooms within the public realm, those places where the public realm creates a space where it's comfortable for people. And I just want to kind of go through a couple examples here and show you how we've highlighted that. You will notice that this is all overlaid on a three-dimensional model of that downtown. I'm not suggesting that you have to be that detailed in your own reporting, but mapping and sort of grounding your information in the environment is critical. So what you see here is sort of existing conditions, noting where things are, noting the pedestrian infrastructure, noting a proposed crosswalk or shift in how folks could cross that street. One of the things noted here was this is the entryway to downtown, and many folks noted that cars kind of enter this at a higher rate of speed, making it really difficult to cross the street. Even though there are crosswalks, sometimes it's still difficult without lights or signals. In particular, we are making the assumption that those car drivers driving at a high rate of speed are in a position to be aware, see, and respond to traffic lights or those sorts of warning signals. Now, this is again sort of following up on that last image. These are sort of examples of what those interventions or updates could be. I think this is a great practice. It shows not only sort of on the map, but in an image what that could look like. And here we have sort of the promotion of extending the radius of an intersection to slow cars down, creating a pop-up park there at the entryway to give some visual appeal. creating some pedestrian refuge islands, the places where you could stop if traffic's really heavy. And then those additional sort of painted or really kind of fancy crosswalks that get people's attentions. Here are some of the kind of medium term outcomes that were proposed. You'll see more pedestrian infrastructure, crosswalks, things that help define circulation, and again, sort of removing some lanes there at the entryway and constraining that really to make the drivers feel as if that road is constricting on them. Because when you feel like a road is constricting, your response is to slow down. Coming through this as a driver, there was really nothing indicating that you were coming through an environment where you needed to slow down. So these were just some of the interventions that were recommended. Again, overlaying those recommendations over images of what it could look like. You can see those bulb outs for traffic calming. Again, condensing that roadway, added crosswalks and signage, adding that medium or adding a parallel parking strip. Again, those cars on the side of the road, condensing the roadway and making people feel like they need to slow down. Okay. And then here again, some long-term changes. You can really see sort of the growing kind of final steps of enclosing and calming traffic, entering that downtown and creating sort of a square in the middle of the community that really kind of promotes walkability and social interaction, a place to congregate, if you will. And then following up on those long-term solutions with some images to kind of demonstrate what that would look like for those leaders who may be making decisions. Again, I do not want to make the assumption that you have the capacity or your community or organization has the capacity to create a sort of an imagery that is as specific or detailed as this. This is very specific and very sort of complicated and technical, if you will. And I certainly don't want you to have the expectation that you have to create something like this. In effect, sometimes this can be too much. And some communities have great success with small reports or a grading scale using that qualitative and quantitative measure, in particular, like the one that is offered by the AARP. Okay. So kind of in closing here, I've given a very broad view of how you would conduct a walking audit. The components you're going to see from a lot of different walking audit tools. There are a lot out there. This is just a snapshot. These are the ones that I am aware of. I am sure that there are a lot more that have been created at the local levels around the country or even around the world. But these are the ones that I have looked at, that I have referenced, that I've really enjoyed. Now, what I will say is that I really, really like the first one listed, the AARP. They have done a wonderful job creating that toolkit. I love that they have a document that is kind of a companion document to the actual assessment that can help a leader really have that initial conversation and support kind of getting everybody on the same page. The Safe Routes to School National Partnership really is focusing on kind of walking as a route to a school. And again, when we're thinking about creating change, if we have young people walking to school, we certainly want to ensure that route that they are walking is safe and comfortable for them. But again, all of these are great resources. I will share each of these and their links in my follow-up email with each of you, in addition to the recording of this PowerPoint. Now, I have not shown any specific questions, but what I would say is that these assessment tools come in all shapes and sizes. Some are very detailed, some are a lot more kind of fluffy. And I think there are places for both, depending on who your group is and what your goals are. So I would encourage you to look at a couple of these and think about if one specifically works for you, or if you'd like to modify and incorporate pieces from multiple. I tend to defer and use the AARP walking audit again, just because I believe it's a great example of both a qualitative and quantitative. They present it in a very great format with a lot of checklists and places for comments for each of those assessors. So again, lots and lots of resources out there. And I am more than willing to support you if you find yourself creating or modifying your own assessment tool. Okay. Now that that really concludes our webinar for today. It's really kind of a basic understanding of getting ready for a walking audit to think about the components and the process, the resources, and how you may go about influencing change and what documents or tools you may want to use in that endeavor. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to ask as a part of this webinar, please take the time now to share those in the Q&A box that you see on your window as you're sort of interacting here on Zoom. But I would also like to invite you to our next webinar. And this really has a brownfield redevelopment focus and thinking about upcoming EPA brownfield funding opportunities. And we're going to have Sean Vroom with the New Jersey Institute of Technology's Brownfield office coming to talk about competitive procurement and working with contractors as a part of a brownfield assessment or brownfield cleanup process. So again, that is our next webinar scheduled for the end of July, July 23rd from 12 to 1 p.m. Again, thank you all so very much for joining us today. I hope you were able to get something out of this. I hope you're excited and energized to coordinate and create your own walking audit in your community. But again, if you have any questions or would like to follow up at any point in the future about organizing one or modifying an assessment tool or creating your own, please feel free to reach out to me. The easiest way is via my email, shane.barton@uky.edu. We have a couple minutes here till the top of the hour. I haven't seen any questions come in yet, but I want to give everyone just a minute or two in case there are any questions or comments before we wrap up. So if you have anything that you'd like to ask, please include that or add that to the Q&A box. Otherwise, we will conclude today's webinar. And again, you will be receiving the recording along with all of the resources that I've shared and links out there to other assessment tools. So without further ado, I am not seeing any Q&A, no questions come up. So I'm going to give you all the remainder of the hour here. We've got 8 minutes. Again, thank you all so much for taking the time to join us today. And I look forward to following up with you all as you plan your own walking audit in your community. So again, take care and enjoy the rest of the day, and hopefully we'll talk soon.